What is up, guys? It's your girl Jasmine Corriette, and I am back again this month with yet another millennial matter. Now, you know what I'm gonna say. If you haven't already done so, pause this video and go ahead and subscribe to your girl channel. Show your girl some love and just keep up with all the matters that revolve around life as a millennial. So for this month, we're gonna be talking about healthy boundaries, just defining what they are, what they look like, how to enforce them, and just where to enforce them. So as you can see, I am sitting here with a special guest on my couch, none other than one of my best friends herself, Shelby. I'm gonna let Shelby go ahead and introduce herself.
Thank you. Well, hi, my name is Shelby Dunbar. I am from Albany, Georgia. I currently reside in Atlanta, Georgia. I am 28 years old, and I'm just excited to be here. As you know, boundaries is definitely something that I struggle with. I'm currently in the transition phase of my life where I'm understanding what healthy boundaries are, as well as just how to effectively enforce them. So thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So yeah, like Shelby, I'm sure many of us are kind of new to the whole boundary thing, but I do realize it's a conversation that I have pretty often with my friends and my peers, which is why I just felt like, yeah, maybe this is a conversation we need to definitely take to social media and just have with y'all. So y'all see my handy dandy notepad. I have some notes and some points I definitely want to make sure I hit. So we're gonna go ahead and just jump right into it. Okay guys, so like I said, for this month, we're going to be talking about boundaries and 4 points about boundaries. So I want to go ahead and define them. I want to talk about where we should enforce them. What does it look like when you don't have boundaries put in place? And then once you realize you need them, just how to enforce healthy boundaries. So we're going to just go ahead and start with the definition. Like I said, Shelby recently struggled with, I guess, being able to like identify boundaries. So I'm going to go ahead and let her give her definition of what boundaries are.
So boundaries to me is pretty much the expectations and the parameters that a person put around themselves in regards to themselves, as well as the relationships with other people. But it's also just understanding other people's parameters and expectations in regards to myself. So I definitely think that's what it is to me.
And I think that's actually a really good definition. So keywords for me that she said was self, right? So when it comes to defining boundaries, this journey is all about you. It's ultimately like making sure that you have measures put in place to ensure that you're becoming the best version of yourself as possible. So I know you're probably like, well, why is this important? Well, it's important because I know, especially with this age, we're all on a self-awareness journey. So making sure that we hold ourselves accountable and then ultimately hold other people accountable really is like a defining moment for us just during this facet of our lives. So with defining boundaries, I know it raises the question, well, where do I enforce boundaries? So Shelby, with you, like I said, realizing that you need boundaries, where are some areas that you notice that you actually have to enforce boundaries?
So definitely 3 areas that I typically think of when it comes to enforcing boundaries is in my social life, in my personal life, as well as my professional life. So when I speak on social life, I'm primarily talking about friends, associates, community organizations, as well as community involvement, as well as like church. Those are just another few on the head when I think of just social and the boundaries.
And that's a really good point, especially with church, y'all. You feel like because Christ is involved, you have to just go ahead and just dedicate all your time to the Lord. And I'm not saying don't do that. Listen, I'm a Christian, I get it, but I think we still have to make sure we're still just keeping some of self and just knowing how to say no, right? And another point you hit on too was just like your friends.
Yep.
That's a big one. I know many of us are like, what? Like my friends? Yes, like you have to make sure you have boundaries put in place with your friends.
Yeah.
And it's not to say like you view them any type of way or you feel any type of way toward them. No, it's just still ultimately making sure that you're just protecting self, right, in those friendships. So what was the other point you hit on? You said socially?
Professionally.
Professionally.
So in my professional life, when I think of professional, I think of work and just all aspects of work. I know a big issue for me is I have a tendency where I will overwork and burn out myself. Probably no, but seriously, like, I'm the type where I've always been above and beyond type person, so I always take on more projects.
Yeah.
I'm literally working 7-8 just last night till 11 o'clock at night, but just not having boundaries in place. So like, hey, 5 o'clock, hard deadline, no work, don't take any calls, no more work, take time.
Yeah.
So separating just, professional from personal.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's just, that's a big issue for me. I'm always overworking and not because I don't have those boundaries in place.
Nah, I ain't gonna lie to y'all. Okay, so I don't have that. I don't have that issue at all. Don't be a Shelby, y'all. Just don't be a Shelby. Listen, work will always be there. You have to realize that. Like, work is always going to be there. And at the end of the day, if you don't take care of yourself and make sure that, hey, there is a separation between, like, business and personal, you'll end up burning yourself out, and then you'll be good to no one, right? Your employer, if you're in school, your professors, your classmates, because you didn't take that time out to prioritize like your needs, and just understanding that the work will get done. So that was a really good point, Shells. Like I said, I think a lot of people definitely struggle with that, especially like in a workplace. And then I think the last point she hit was personal.
Yes. So when I think personal, again, it's just self. So the healthy boundaries that I set in regards to myself, as well as just my intimate relationship. So with a partner, and also just personal.
And I definitely will say, like, I'm gonna add to that. So she said with just intimately with a partner, just with yourself, and I'm gonna add family to that as well.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, so those are some roles that I think we play, and the vulnerability is a lot lower, and you feel like you do have a certain like expectation or obligation whenever you're in these roles, especially like being a partner and just belonging to a family, right? So I definitely think it is important to have those boundaries so that you're still maintaining a sense of who you are while you're in these roles that cause for you to be so vulnerable, because you do run the risk of losing yourself in a lot of these relationships, so like I think making sure you have those boundaries put in place definitely helps like keep you intact and just keep sight of just who you are while you're still existing in those roles. So good stuff, Shelby, good stuff. So like I said, words enforce them socially, personally, and professionally. Okay guys, so we talked about defining boundaries and just why they're important, where to actually enforce these boundaries, and now I kind of want to get into how to identify if you even need boundaries, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm kick this one. So, being mentally and physically exhausted, I mean literally like it even showing in your face. I know that was a big one for me, just like ripping and running and just not even realizing like, oh shoot, like at what point did I actually take time for myself, right? Or just forgetting to take time for yourself. And like I said, it started to like bother me emotionally because I felt like I was getting kind of overwhelmed. And then it started to physically show. I just wasn't even practicing any of my little skin, my little skin routines, because I was just constantly just ripping and running, like not working out. All because I was sitting here trying to satisfy other people. So have you ever experienced anything like that?
Definitely. So I definitely would say that it has been an experience of mine. But something else that I've also experienced is just feeling the need to take on everyone else's problem.
Yeah.
So always just being available, if they text, call, come by, just that feeling that, oh, I have to be there, I have to help them with this, I have to be super present. And it's because I didn't have boundaries in place.
And I think that's a really good point too. Like that kind of brings me to my next point of just not prioritizing your needs and your wants, right? So it's definitely nothing wrong with sitting and serving as that Dr. Phil to whomever.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just kind of gotta know when to say no, or just take a step back, right? Just making sure that you're constantly putting your needs and your wants first, and then ultimately helping other people. So I say like a lack thereof is definitely like, I know, a big one for me.
And it's kind of like the notion of pouring into someone, and you can't pour into someone if you're not filled yourself. So if you're not full yourself, you can't pour into someone else. And you know that goes into my next point of just lack of appreciation and being taken advantage of.
Oh yes.
You know, it's constantly, like you said, pouring into someone, being there, supporting, doing this and the third, and it's like you're not getting that fulfillment or either reciprocity back, and it's like you're further exhausting yourself because of that.
That's a good point. Snap. Nah, y'all, but for real, like, that's a really good point. That actually leads me into my next point, which I think the two very much go hand in hand, is when you make an attempt, right, to actually be honest with yourself, honest with your feelings, and you go ahead and you're like, hey, no, right, and your friends or whomever just doesn't respect how you feel. So an example would be, you know, you've had a really long day, your friend hits you up and they're like, hey, hey Shelf, let's go ahead and do this. You know deep down inside you do not want to do it, and you say it. You're like, hey, I think I'm gonna pass, but they're still insisting, like, no, you should. And at that point, they're not being respectful of just how you feel, right? They're literally trying to just push you to your limit, and just push past those boundaries that you are trying to enforce. So I think, like I said, just having people not respect how you feel is a really, really big one. And I think that also will lead me into my last point of just overthinking.
Yes.
Overthinking and taking things personal. So we're overthinkers, the both of us.
Very bad.
It's real bad. We overthink so much, and for people like us, I think we tend to definitely get lost in our thoughts, and I think it is hard not to take things personal.
Yeah.
When you're so used to being everything for everybody.
Yep.
But I think that's definitely like a red flag, right? Like, you realize that you're taking things personal, and you really don't even have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
You're overthinking issues that really don't have anything to do with you. So yeah, definitely overthinking and taking things personal is a big one. So I'm gonna just go ahead and I'm gonna recap. So we said being mentally and physically exhausted, not prioritizing your own needs, very much overthinking and taking things personal, having people not respect how you feel. We said just lack of appreciation, or just your effort, right? Just people not appreciating what you do contribute. And then lastly, constantly feeling like you have to fix people's problems. So for us, those are some of the ways that we feel like if that's you need boundaries, right? You need to go ahead and start enforcing the boundaries, which brings me to my last point, guys. Now that you have been able to identify that you need these boundaries, how do you enforce them? Okay, so with enforcing boundaries, obviously that looks different just per the individual. But here are a few ways that Shelby and I actively and are currently making sure that we are enforcing these healthy boundaries. First point being saying no. Learning when to say no.
Yes. And even with saying no, not feeling guilty about it and not feeling the need to provide an excuse of why you said no. It's
That's
like,
really good point.
no, I said no. I said what I said.
Period, poo.
Like, even with saying no, I think it's also okay to say yes.
Yeah.
But saying yes without feeling the obligation. I'm saying yes because I truly want to.
Absolutely. And I think even with those 2 points, like making sure that you're direct, because I know we tend to tiptoe around people's feelings, and sometimes you just gotta be flat up, like, no, right? Just making sure that you're being honest, and even when doing so, making sure that you're increasing your self-awareness, right? Just holding yourself accountable. So as soon as you realize, okay, wait, am I being taken advantage of? Or you just hear any of those red flags, or you notice any of those red flags, you can catch yourself and go ahead and start putting your boundaries in place.
Yeah, and even furthermore, just not being too accessible to people. I definitely think this is something that, I deal with heavily.
Yeah.
Is because I'm just too accessible. So definitely limiting the access to you, whether it's, hey, I'm not going to respond to message today, or hey, I'm going to put my phone down and take time to myself, or, whatever that is, just not allowing people to have so much access to you, primarily because I understand that everyone can't have access to me, and everyone does not deserve to have access to me.
Absolutely. And that leads me into my next point of increasing your self-care, right? Like, obviously I can't tell you how to practice self-care, but just whatever it looks like, as far as making sure that your mind, body, and soul is just all aligned. So whether that means seeing a therapist, whether that means working out, eating clean, whether that means talking to God or just meditating, understanding that, like, prioritizing your self-care, of course, it won't happen overnight, but just prioritizing your self-care, I think, is definitely a good way to go ahead and make sure that you are enforcing your boundaries.
And understanding that is also understanding, like, you don't have to start big. I think we get so consumed on it has to be big, it has to be cold turkey. And it doesn't. You can literally start small. So whether it's, okay, I'm just going to start with my friend group, or I'm going to start at work. Just something small and just working your way up.
And I think, like, I also want people to realize that it's not easy for everyone to make such a big transition when it comes to enforcing boundaries. So, like, you have support, right? Like, make sure, like, that you have someone to hold you accountable, someone that you can talk about this stuff with, like, confidant, right? Just a safe space to where you can sit and be like, hey, man, like, how do I get back on track, right? Or just being there for someone else. So, guys, like I said, those are 4 points that we wanted to hit on in regards to boundaries, defining them, why they're important, where to enforce them, how to identify if you even need them, and lastly, how to enforce them. So I want to definitely give my girl Shelby a big round of applause for just coming on my show and just allowing herself to be vulnerable. Like I said, it's not easy, but like I said, these are some things that we realize are pretty important within our generation, so we just felt like we should share them with you. So until next time, guys, later.